An entrepreneur, unlike other persons, where they see problems, entrepreneurs actually see increased opportunities. And that is crucial. You know, Jamaicans have a way of saying that Jamaica no problem. And people question what kind of idea is this. But it speaks about the mind of the persons who are Jamaican. How can one conceptualize a space where there is no problem? It takes a certain kind of mindset. So ultimately, the Jamaican mindset is one of optimism. You know, unfortunately, sometimes how information is disseminated in the media, it tends to spread a kind of doubt, you know, pessimism. Yes, still amongst all that negative information, the data actually have Jamaica as one of the highest ranking countries in terms of the happiness index. It's a oxymoron, a kind of contracted paradox. This is kind of a situation in Jamaica. No, I'm here to speak about, let me just say thanks to the JN team, Ian, and of course all protocols. You know, it's really a wonderful situation where different stakeholders can come together to share, because entrepreneurship again is about sharing what we know and see how we can improve our quality of lives by primarily empowering people to empower themselves. Speak the social entrepreneurial approach, and this is the content. I was asked to address these things in my own way by the team from JN. The history of social enterprise in Jamaica is the social economy and the social progress index. They asked us to focus primarily on the social economy. The social economy, but of course, understanding how it's measured, I think is crucial as well. Extremely important. So there are measurements there, and I think an interesting finding come out from that kind of measurement. Why social enterprises, challenges, and opportunities the way forward? And I am presenting a methodology because I think that is important. Entrepreneurship is not about theory, all it is made up of both theory and practice, but it's primarily about practice. It is not a noun, it's a verb. It's the doing components that is crucial. It's not the, you know? So we want to take on that part of the sentence. Let I be the verb in the sentence, the doers. So building effective social enterprises. That's what SEBI is about. How do we build effective social enterprises? And effective in itself has a meaning. It is anchored in how do you meaningfully create social value in a sustainable way. And how do you monitor and evaluate the creation of the social value and monetize that creation of social value, which I think is very important. So in the broader framework, we use what is called an integrated approach. That is what UNEP is using to look at sustainability, economic, social, and biodiversity components. And of course, that maps directly onto the social entrepreneurial model, which uses the same triple bottom line approach, economic, social, and environmental concerns. So right now, the social enterprise model really reflects a micro of a macro model, and it is crucial. Yes, we understand that macro policies are important to effect systemic changes. However, we know that, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. It is the micro that makes the macro. And if we get both of it right, it means we can move forward properly. So what makes it officially a social enterprise? These discussions have taken place this morning. Very clear mission. Yes? Very clear mission. But we know that words without work can't sustain. So the reality is, you ask yourself, how do you sustain this mission? It can't be about begging. It has to have an independent income source, where it is directly related, indirectly related, or not related at all to what you're doing. But you need that independent income source. Hence, trade is crucial. And importantly, just as both Safra has said and the minister has said earlier, money that is generated, it is not for shareholders, but to pump back into the mission, to expand. Very crucial. From my own bias approach, when we look at the business models, I look at social enterprises as high growth enterprises. I'm not into poverty alleviation because I don't like poverty. I'm into wealth creation because with the abundance of resources, we can transform those into wealth. And we have seen it happen in many, 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 many ways. It's about wealth creation. Additionally, poverty alleviation has a kind of limit because there's a poverty line. So what is the aim? To get people just above the poverty line? What is the difference between those who are just above and just below the poverty line in terms of poverty? Not much. Yes, I think poverty alleviation is a kind of trick word. Reinvest in the majority of the profits to further the social mission. So here we say there are the social mission in mind, not self-centered. How we measure success is different. However, in the measuring, this is what has happened to a lot of social entrepreneurs. We grow up in a culture where we think that this is about volunteerism. But once you start to practice these things, you do not put any real monetary value on what you're doing. You don't measure it. But if we know, and in discussions with Doug from COMET is the Community Empowerment and Transformation Program, which is funded by USAID, we start to look at the examples in terms of cost savings that has been occurred because of programs, social entrepreneurial programs. And in looking at these programs, we argue, if a number of youths in the communities are at risk of being victim of crime or becoming criminals, what will be the cost to the Jamaican society? And if we argue that 2 out of 10 of these youths might become victims of crime or perpetrators of crime, what is the proxy that you can use to get some kind of money value? Well, they probably end up in prison. If they end up in prison, what is the cost of maintaining a person in prison for a year? 890,000 Jamaican dollars. 2 out of 10, that is 1.8 million. So you think about the programs that people operate that engage youths within these communities and start to think about how much money is being made. And that is just the explicit savings. What if that person is transformed from using his brain, which is very creative and innovative, which you have to be as a criminal, to give trouble but to produce legal goods and services, which is an outcome? And then how does the production of those goods and services improve the quality of life of persons who benefit from the production of those goods and services? That is also an impact. At 3 different levels, we have to monetize these things, but we have not done any. So sometimes I get frustrated with the work that they're doing because they think things are not changing as rapidly as it can. But the reality is, if you start to monetize these things, then you start to see how impacting your work has been. You create value in terms of economic, social, and environmental situation. That is what the social enterprises does. So the aim is to move us away from that paradigm paralysis where we think that NGOs are sustained by grants and gifts or through political donations when politicians seem and deem it necessary. Yes? But the reality is, it is not about volunteerism. You do not need a word to do good for your society, man. Jamaicans, Caribbean people generally are perpetual volunteers. So you can't volunteer already as an ex-volunteer. It's a double volunteerism. But that is the reality of Jamaica. Will always be volunteering. The person who volunteers, usually I find in these communities and many organizations, are those who are unemployed as well. So is it real volunteerism, or is that you're really finding time, you have time to do something, so you use the time and do something positive? Now, what if you should get a work? What will happen to the time that is used to volunteer? What will happen to that organization, which depends upon you now to carry out a key function? And you cannot tell the person that they should not do that because we are socialized to think that people operate in their own self-interest. All those hierarchies that we have always speak about the person satisfying himself first. So unless you're saying that the socialization process is wrong, which a Rastaman will say, that's what I say. But you're not Rastafari people. So I assume that you argue that is true. And in that truth, it means somebody who volunteers as an unemployed person, when as a rational being the opportunity emerges from the general income, he will leave that volunteering position to go and take out that paid position. But because social enterprises are so crucial to the transformation process, you need the best set of persons there. Because we are not just about generating money income, you're about changing people's life in a systemic way. You need serious kind of commitment. Yes, you need resilience. And the truth is, our people already have those things because people have been volunteers for 30 years. We have people who are supposed to retire from being volunteers and still volunteering. As a matter of fact, we think they're going to retire is the next opportunity to be a volunteer. Yeah, that's how it is in the country. So we're saying, unless you're paying those people, recognize that the services you offer have value and pay them as a part of the operational cost of the enterprise. And then the profit that is generated, what is used to finance the programs that help to fulfill the mission. So we're mission-driven. Want diversified funding schemes that can still get grants. However, you want your own independent funding scheme, especially in a country like Jamaica. So my brother Arnold Brown right here, State Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs, and we know what it is like, man. The reality is, you can't depend upon political people to give you money to run social programs. First, I say them don't have no money. Second, when them start to give you some money, somebody might ask for favors. There's a reality. You know, I learned something from Arnold. Well, let me not say that right here. But it's about how the democratic process operates and some of the things that fuels corruption as well. You know? But the reality is, understand the space that you're operating in. And if a lot of things are politicized, it means that you need to have an independent income source. So you can freely put in place the programs that you want. It was the next space which was not so politicized, probably could use a different approach. But the reality is, the culture of decision-making in Jamaica cautions operators of organization that you cannot depend upon political sources for your income to move your programs. And of course, the sustainability is crucial. So what about the history of social entrepreneurship? Seemingly new concept. But it's not a new concept, it's just new words. And I start again with my own bias of Marcus Garvey and all these things that happen to many persons. But if you look at the history of Caribbean persons, entrepreneurship, they argue, is a process of creating value by bringing together a unique set of resources in order to seize or exploit an opportunity. The word business is not in the definition of entrepreneurship. An entrepreneur is he who undertakes a venture. Burning a plantation and going into the hills, not knowing what the situation is, was a calculated risk. And you had to establish means of sustaining those groups, which was trade. Just go back to the same high school history and you'll see these things coming out. Free villages, and again, Gervin had spoken to this in one of his papers in 2013. Here they argued about Marcus Garvey, saying that Marcus Garvey did not seek to benefit from anything that he had for himself. It was really about persons. And if you look at the model, it was a really beautiful model. Here Marcus Garvey had, it was called the UNEP, Universal Negro Improvement Association, which the mission was to empower black people as a nation. How did he sustain it? He established what is called the African Communities League. The African Communities League, which would be like a combination of a Jamaica Business Corporation and a JAMPRO, because they are both small and large businesses that it will provide service to. He established that, and out of that, they had an international shipping organization, Black Star Line, 1914, just around the time the Panama Canal opened up, they started UNIA. So it was clear that shipping was something that people need to look at. Again, it is instructive, because we were reading Marcus, you'd recognize that the Panama Canal would have been expanded 100 years, which he actually stated. And all seem like we're frightened and not prepared, because we don't appreciate the own people's brain. So you had the shipping company, then you had the Negro Structure Corporation. These are what people now call MSMEs, micro, small, and medium enterprises. And you have nano enterprise, which are other businesses. That was the structure. You recognize the context in which you're operating and realize that in order to fulfill a mission, you need an independent source of income. Both large enterprises and small enterprises capturing many different stakeholders. Of course, there are lessons to be learned from what has happened to Marcus in terms of how you manage the growth of high-growth enterprises. Crucial thing for us to understand. The body of research, a lot of research has been, well, the research is growing. And so what we're thinking about is informed by these 5, I think, the major researches carried out by the office, but also carried out in Jamaica in terms of the landscape. The first one examined the effects of non-state actors in creating social value and how they measure social value. That came directly out of the Office of Social Entrepreneurship, because we were having students supporting these organizations, and we start to question, is this thing effective? How do we understand what drives the effectiveness? Digital Foundation Back to Roots program. Doing program started about in 2012, where they financed a lot of different organizations to establish enterprises. But in reviewing what was happening, we recognize that the model that is required is a social entrepreneurial model. Those organizations didn't have the kind of governance structure to operate as a social enterprise. They didn't have the kind of business model or governance structure. So it means that one of the lessons learned is that we need to address that. The Jamaican JNU SEBI social enterprise boosting report, the baseline study, which is probably the most comprehensive, but it's the most comprehensive out of all the reports because it examines the entire landscape. Not just the non-state actors or cases, but examining what was happening straight across the board in terms of the social enterprise landscape in Jamaica. PIOJ CRP program. Again, we did some research there where we use a lot of cognitive tests in analyzing persons who are going to engage in this idea of social entrepreneurship, which I think a crucial thing came from that research as well. And now what we have here is Commit 2, Community Empowerment and Transformation Program. We have just completed some research. And what has happened is that I think that Commit 2 has benefited from all the previous research. And when we look at the model of Commit 2, which we'll do in the future, later in the presentation, when you look at the model of Commit 2, I think it presents that holistic framework that is really required to move enterprises along a growth path. So I have a lot of work that has been done. Just to run through these quickly. OSC, majority of NGOs are vulnerable. We use Kushness models, and I will show you an example of what the Kushness model is. They are vulnerable and not very effective in creating social value. Now, take this within the context of the counterfactual. Because you ask yourself, what if these persons were not operating? The situation would have been much, much worse. So take the research in as a positive critique, which means that if we become better at what we do, we'll be generating much, much more social value. So I mean, all these gaps that are there, look at what is happening in the country. No clear monitoring and evaluation strategies. But the reality is, even funding agencies do not ask persons to do anything beyond the log frame, which means that we are still looking at outputs. We're not looking at outcomes or impact. Budget depends upon gifts and grants. Funding is decreasing based on official government assistance. And again, a lot of the funding is offered through the commercial banks, which of course tend to be, as the culture suggests, operate in their own self-interest. So I do not understand why do we think that they will be operating differently. You know, I mean, you have to really be realistic. No matter if you're my friend. Business and friend don't mix. You know, NGOs' perception that HR tends to be adequate. The reality is that the NGOs have confidence in their personnel to carry out the duty, and that is why SEBI is always understaffed, because SEBI and Jennifer and all those persons, they think they can carry all the work to support a country of 3.8 million people. And I may say because early this year, so you can know they need to organize some more stuff as well. I mean, I say behind him back, say different time. The work would be much, much more. You know? But that goes for all organizations that you have engaged. All organizations. But that's the reality. 3-5 persons do a big thing like this. I mean, that's why I'm not getting no more budget, because you don't need anything else. Less than adequate governance platform. Again, there's no direct funding allocated through the state to support social enterprises. Of course, we have funding for micro, small, and medium enterprises. Those things need to be looked at again, yes? But the funding is there. So we have a big part of the gap that has been filled because the money is there. The question now, how do we more effectively utilize this money that is there? Paradigm paralysis, again, the focus on voluntarism. Now, out of the digital program, this dynamic emerged, what we call the social value creation framework. And it speaks, let's look at what is happening on the ground. We realize that governance stage is crucial, which Comet has looked at. Do not set up people to be called crooks. If you give people money, and they don't have the capacity to use the money well, as honest as they are, the people around their constituents will say that they cannot account for the money, and we call them a thief. If you never give them money in the first place, they couldn't be called a thief. And I know many persons, people raise questions about where's the money, but they don't even have a proper accounting system. So how then would they account for the money? And you're not giving them money to build the accounting system, you're giving them money to run a program. So unless you address what are the preconditions, which is the governance platform, it makes no sense. And that is straight across the board, from community organizations to governments as well. Yes, it happened to Nigeria. If you think Nigeria is corrupt, why do you still give money to Nigeria? So they can prove to be more corrupt. Set the governance first. Enterprise development. So once that part is completed, they need the enterprise development stage, and this is where the foundations, the endowments, international partners, etc. will come in. Yes? But the research and incubator is crucial. So now, here is OSC. Our colleague, Dr. Williams from UTEC is over there as well. UTEC have a really good program. NCU also have an incubator program. Yes? There's a Bronson Center. There are no shortages of places that are emerging. What is beautiful about it is that these persons tend to share ideas. They support each other. We make recommendations about where it could go. There is no big fish in a small pond mentality amongst those in academia who are practicing social entrepreneurship. UTech produces the document GEM. It's one of the most crucial entrepreneurial documents within the region, and they actually made a special issue on social entrepreneurship about 3 or 4 years ago. So the research is there, even though I didn't use it. That's one of the core research that I had right here. Personal development, relevant ministries, and again, it is good that the ministers recognize that this thing takes into account several different ministries. So Safra this morning and the minister emphasized the enterprise component as business and venture creation in social entrepreneurship. But the entrepreneurial practice and thinking can be applied to any kind of sector. Spiritual, social, political, environmental. What is required is a certain kind of mindset and attitude in recognizing that your action is actually creating value. And what is given to you is an investment, and then what then is the expected rate of return on that investment? Extremely important. International funding agencies, so once the positive event has been done to relevant ministries, that provides a framework to negotiate for support from the international funding agencies. And all this can be anchored within the whole framework of Vision 2030. Jamaica, the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business. How do we do these things? Now, SEBI, no clear policy framework for social entrepreneurship. No work has been done in terms of the entrepreneurship policy. Again, the discussions this morning shows that there's an intent to address some of these things. Funding for MSMEs, we know what the research has shown in terms of how social enterprises operate. They tend to survive faster beyond the 2-year period than traditional MSMEs. The growth rates are also faster, and the impact is also greater because it is used to support programs that impact a number of other persons. Disconnect with negotiators or funding how it is happening on the ground. And it's a very serious thing to consider. Too many persons are experts in things that they do not know. You know, and we do not like to admit ignorance. You can ask a simple person who understands it to come and speak. So go for a practitioner. And let me speak to the technocrat, and then the technocrat will come informed. You don't have to go to a researcher as the next problem, you know. Because you also think that PhD means that you know how to do. PhD, you know what it means? You know how to do. It means that to understand methodology, we can carry out research. But a lot of PhD persons are desk researchers. Every time you call them office, they are in the office. We want people in the street who are on the ground doing these things, who understand what needs to be done and have the passion about doing it. But get the information. No meaningful assessment of programs. This keep coming up. You can't be giving money to a person and do not ask for meaningful monitoring and evaluation. Why then are you giving the money? You know, and again, as Rastafari, I sometimes think about conspiracy, you know. This is a general person. So why you keep giving people money and don't ask them for any real performance measurement? What is the purpose of the money? So if they underperform, and you still give them money, what incentive do they have to perform? What's the real incentive? And it can't be just an oversight. It can't be just an oversight. The reality is, if somebody is giving you something, they must have some kind of intention. If the intention is to improve, what are the indicators to show that you are improving? And is it beyond just a point? What is the bigger impact? Because of the multiplier effect. But if that is not required by those who give, then why? Anyway, there are always a number of different scenarios, but that is just one scenario I'm throwing out right here. But we need to realize that. No, this is what you're saying again. Role of IDPs. Need to demand performance management. They also recognize that you can build communities, but it must be sustained by enterprise. State agencies, Safra said this morning, facilitators of the third sector, but recognizing that it's not a welfare space. It's a wealth creation space where people have access to resources. SDC, a super organization without a budget. Without a capital budget. You know, over 800 communities on the ground with so many persons, but no real capital budget. And again, we tend to focus too much on the formal economy. I mean, again, in a space which is supported by a J in a very formal organization. But the reality is that the formal sector has not grown for the past 50 odd years in any meaningful way. Now, we know that we look at growth models There's a point in which where you start, the growth rate starts to decline, and you need to innovate or die. Which means that Jamaica is in that innovation or die loop for the past 50 years. So how then have we seen so many improvements in the Jamaican space? It is because of the informal space. That is the most innovative and creative space, except that we use innovation and creativity to engage in illegal activity as well. So Jamaicans are also ranked globally in the top 5 in terms of illegal innovation and creativity application. By far. You know, I don't hear anybody saying how we're taking over the people, formal economy, but we're taking over them crime space. It's a takeover nonetheless, which requires acumen, and we are very good at that. But energy is energy, and it can be redirected. And I'm saying, let us start to look at some of those areas to see if we can find innovative ideas there to support that can catalyze significant changes in the space. And we have the evidence again, when we ask students to conduct innovation, audits, and market invention on the formal economies, it actually shows that many of the organizations do not embrace an innovative culture. So it's not just, I mean, the research is there. We just haven't written up that research yet, but the data, and that's what it's actually showing. So we need to look at the other economy. We need to look at it. And that social economy is also a part of that space, because when you look at what happens in Jamaica, I get to that point. When you look at Jamaica in the social economy index where we are ranked, how do you explain that ranking? I will see clearly. SE bridges the gap between community and the other stakeholders. The social enterprises bridge the gap between the community and other stakeholders. And of course, over the years, we have used this thing in a kind of social welfare approach. Private sector, again, even though we might complain about some of the attitudes of the private sector, they tend to form win-win scenarios with a lot of public organizations. And many private sector organizations now have a lot of endowment programs and foundations. Still need to take that a bit more serious in terms of what and how do we measure the return on the investment, but nonetheless, we have that kind of relation. We have that kind of relationship. We're always sponsoring events, whether it's football, netball, any kind of program. Yes, there's that part in the organization, but we need to deal with it more serious. No emphasis on the rate of return on investment. I mean, if you give so much money to Jamaica National Foundation, why are we not asking about what's the rate of return on the investment as an investment? And if South Africa can show that there's a high rate of return on investment, why give her a budget next year? No, seriously. If we can show that they have a high rate of return, why give her the money? Because they don't take money and invest in things that they don't get in rate of return on. Unless it's a government organization, and even the government. Yeah, because we learn in economics that government is supposed to make money, but I say that this government is shifting the whole thing of what governments do. But nonetheless. Yep. But this thing supports the idea of duty of care. Yes, we know what the ISO standards argue. And again, it's not about just external, but the internal customers as well. The whole landscape must be one that is conducive to this kind of thinking. CDC, comment research, extremely important. A part of the true bottom line is environmental concerns, and that's about natural hazards, but the entire space in which we operate. But you recognize that within the research it is showing that communities that are examined think that environmental stewardship is the responsibility of the community, the government, and other stakeholders. That is what they recognize and they have bought into, so that is the reality. All stakeholders have a role to play in disaster risk reduction and climate change resilience. But the CDC itself is not really so much engaged in the programs themselves because they might not have the resources to do so. So the consciousness and awareness is there in the landscape, but the resources to do so might be a problem. Governance structure tends to be generally weak, and this is the community development councils now. These are the community organizations. But again, this is the same thing with endowments and foundations. So apparently those who operate within the third sector tend to have similar problems across the board. But I'm arguing though, with all these problems that are similar across the board, how is that we have done so much? I can ask the same thing. When Bolt and Asaf and all those persons were training, what they were training on? What kind of resources were they training with? Then how comes they have performed so well? That's what I mean, we need to just think about it. So even with the absence of the resources that are required, we still tend to outperform others at the international level. So there's that passion that drives you. Now, what if we were to get more adequate resources? And it doesn't necessarily mean money. There are other things here. Perceive adequate or strong human resources capacity, just as the earlier research. Of course, financial, technological, and infrastructure vulnerability. No efficient M&E. The results are the same. When we ask about financial sustainability, because you have the rubric in which you use, nobody responded to it. We found the same thing with endowments and foundations. Nobody responded to those questions, which was inciting. Because A, it means that you're probably not keeping proper records. B, you're probably not operating anything profitably, so you don't want people to know that you're not operating profitably. And C, it means that you really don't understand the power of leverage of proper data. Because you can understand why you're not operating as efficient as you can and ask it, use it as a platform to get additional resources. If you're performing well, use it as a platform to get more resources to expand your performance. Either way, you cannot lose. But if you do not have the information, what then you give the assessor to use to assess your performance? So we just need to get the information out. Now, so here we are in the social economy. Why are SE important? There's a conference done by United Nations Research Institute for Social Development in 2013. A paper by Gervin as well in 2013. So we use some of that to speak to this thing. Really, without all the thing on the board, it's about how do we bring our conscience to a capitalist space. It's like enlightening capitalism. While we're taught about selfish self-interest, it's about enlightening self-interest. Yes? So all these ideas about corporate social responsibility, environmental stewardship, social investments, etc., came out of this kind of thing of the social economy. Reclaim the market for social ends or bring a social purpose to capital. That's what you're saying. Putting money and business in the service of the people and the planet. So it's not just about the individual. Here, Gervin argues that SSE are often traced to the Caribbean movement in Europe. But this has been a part of the Caribbean culture, and he speaks to the free villages. Yes? Same thing he speaks about indentured laborers as well. And he argues that the Caribbean community development movements and corporates of the 1930s, 50s were based essentially on these same kind of principles. So it's not about the idea, it's about the practice of. And note, just as how we have Marcus Garvey, and we have all these people, and we have all the persons who come with ideas, we never really truly appreciate the ideas that emerge out of a people. And again, the political process derails a lot of these things. So while you have programs like the cooperatives, and you have the NYS and all those social programs, because again, through Comet 1, we have done some research to look at how these things are happening across the region, across the entire region. And a lot of good ideas emerge, but you're politicized. And once you're politicized, people start to lose focus on what the program is really about. So we're not short of ideas. We're not short of ideas. Yes? So, social progress. Your ability to meet basic human needs, foundations of well-being and opportunity. That is what the index is really about. Here are the basic needs. You have nutrition and basic medical care. You have things like access to basic knowledge and the foundations of well-being, health and wellness. These are linked into MDGs. Yes? Linked into MTGs. And so the social index creates a holistic framework for measuring. Look at where Jamaica is ranked. 43 out of 132. 43. Where's Jamaica rank in the HDI? 90 odd. Yes? So how is that our social index is like that? Now, this is something you are not expected to see, but I'm just pointing out one thing right here. This is what Jamaica is. Now, here on one hand, you have the social progress index. Here you have the GDP per capita. So you realize where Jamaica GDP is. But look how high the index is in relation to other countries. So a number of countries who have much, much higher GDP than Jamaica have much lower index ranking than Jamaica. All these below here are below Jamaica. How? What causes this to happen? What dynamic is within Jamaica that supports a movement which improves the quality of lives of people in a meaningful way? Which sector is doing it? And you still don't produce any report. You don't produce a report and we're complaining about them not money and the policy structure is the change is too slow. But you're not evidencing these things. I have to go to a UN report to see what is happening in Jamaica. And we have UE, we have UTEC, we have NCU. But we're just doing. You know? Some of them must have, we just do what they need to do. So here I say the methodology, 10 minutes we have to do this part. 5 steps, and it's a combination of things that we learn from out of the CRP program and commit and all the other programs as well. A, you need to conduct a situation analysis and just review of existing literature and the landscape. Asset mapping, SDC do a lot of asset mapping. There's a GEM reports. Again, there are reports that are coming from our research as well. Then when you look at business development approaches, here you will know what is happening with the organization. You'll find what's happening in the governance structure and where they are. Business development approaches are applicable to the targeted group because not every approach is suited for every group. Because you have many different approaches to social enterprises. Design a comprehensive business development program specifically addressing development entrepreneurial skill set among the target group, and this is crucial. You know, the data actually shows from GEM that while Jamaica in about 2008 was ranked in the top 5 countries in terms of entrepreneurial mindset, they're realizing now that the landscape itself doesn't facilitate entrepreneurship. So a lot of this is really hustling. It's the same innovation and creativity, but it is hustling, and it is being driven primarily by necessity. Entrepreneurship is needs. Needs are driving these kind of things. So I have the creativity and the innovation, but that skill set. And it is also argued that unless persons who are not exposed beyond the secondary education are less likely to engage in high-growth enterprises. Yet most of our businesses are owned by persons not far beyond secondary school education. And this is what GEM is showing, but we're not reading the GEM report. So Dr. Williams right there, so you know, say can't say do him. See him right there. Ask him for the reports and read those things. It makes no sense and do such good research and we're not using it to inform what we're doing. Then you need to develop the business plans and business models. Business models in particular. I think we're really drunk with the thing of business plan. The business model is more dynamic. It shows you where you need to get done. If a business model don't make sense, it don't make sense to write a business plan. And of course, the monitoring and evaluation. I will run through this thing here quickly. Situation analysis, look at the research. Business approaches. You have old business, traditional business approaches. What is the context? The context is really about vulnerability/sustainability. What are the models that link into that concept? The social enterprise model. What the program is like. Selection and diagnostic phase, and we go through these quickly again. Who are the persons you are targeting? What's the enterprise management training that is required? The development of business plans and models. And note, when we say business plans and models, it can be about any sector again. Let me use a quick example, which people can really relate to. The church. The church offers a value proposition that is not consumed while you're in three-dimensional space. That is while you're alive. Yet still people constantly invest in this value proposition with the hope of consuming it post the existence in three-dimensional space. And do it effectively. That billions of people and generations buy into the business model. So if you can really develop a truly robust business model that actually changes as the consumer changes, because they recognize that the way the church offers services has changed over time, because they realize that their target market, consumer patterns are changing as well. So the pastor have a laptop and a projector in the church, when one time you couldn't even do certain things in the church. Remember them used the computer as a mark of the beast, you know. So understand the crucialness. Yeah, them usually say that the computer is a beast and say it equal to 666. All those things are said, especially by the... All right, so incubator is crucial. Accessing resources and leveraging the strategy. And of course, the growth strategy. The point I'm making though, the business model. We need to get the business model right. And once that is right, you can have a sustainable enterprise taking place. So you have tools you can use. We had applied these tests. Functional academic skills test, which is the FAST and the Ravens test. One's an aptitude and one's a cognitive test. Why? Because you need to know the capacity to absorb and you need to know their own acumen, how they respond to these things. Yes? Training should aim to get entrepreneurs above grade 9/secondary school aptitude level, again, because that supports high-growth enterprises. And you must employ what is called a learning by doing methodology. And why we say this? When we did the research, and test the cognitive level of the youth. It seemed to be low. However, what we found is that if you will place them in a situation which is their general reality, like say, okay, we're going to plan to go on the road to do something, you will see that the mindset is very different. So the way things are asked determine some of the responses that you're getting. I just have 1 minute. 3.4, incubator system. It must cover the entire entrepreneurial process, from idea generation to harvesting, but it must address also the precondition, which is the governance structure. If you have an idea, you must be able to recognize opportunity, develop the concept properly, identifying and accessing the resources, which is crucial. And here you have an incubator system matrix. Look at the institutions that are there. JBDC, the TIC Center in UTEC, UNCU, donor agencies, foundations, endowments, institutions. Again, we're saying that the institutional support must follow the entrepreneurial process and also the growth cycle. These things have to be done if we're going to go through this survival, rapid growth, expansion, and maturity. The innovation or decline element is crucial. And I'm asking persons who are here to go and look at New Horizon Christian ministries around here in terms of some of the innovations that they have. You know, they have this, them says a coal stove, but it's not a coal stove. It don't look like a coal stove, but it uses lumber. You know, bamboo as well. But you know what I mean? It's something we need to look at. Earn income strategies. Are you going to improve, again, from current business, develop new products, find new customers, or new products or existing customers? There are so many things that can be done. Look at the growth strategy. There are a number of different approaches to growth strategy, but do we employ any of these? Do we think about growth strategy when we're talking about these organizations? They can grow in size, they can replicate the business concept, which we find to be a common thing amongst many NGOs. Not necessarily bad, because if it's replicated and there's some structure, it helps in scale and market penetration. Yes? Collaborate or merge with other social ventures in the same cluster to develop processes. There are many ways of dealing with it, but again, if we do not think about it in this kind of way, we will not materialize these things. And here's what the process is like. Idea inception, strategy launch, survival, rapid growth, expansion, maturity or decline. This is where the pharma sector tends to be. Many of our economies are driven primarily by mature industry, in particular the tourism industry. If you don't have any radical shift in the tourism operations, you will not get any increase. But Crawford know these things, you know. Damon Crawford know these things. Dr. Carlin Hale has pointed out these things a number of times. So it's not welfare promotion. 5, measuring these things are crucial. How effective you are and how vulnerable you are is crucial. The social rate of return on investment is also extremely important. The idea is not to focus on inputs, activities and outputs, but to really move to outcomes and impact, because that is where the social value is created. Here is Kushness' model, and he's arguing about customer satisfaction, resource mobilization, and it says that if you have these things worked out properly, then you can really support and generate, sustain social value. We need to look at the vulnerability. Equity, revenue concentration. You do not want all your funding to be in one pot. Operating margins are important as well. The SROI. Yes, time is up. It's just when the time is up. So just next 2 minutes, please. Now, SROI, critical. Social rate of return on investment. And I see this training because just as we are going to talk about, make sure you measure this thing here. The time is up. And it's almost up and one of the most important, but anyway. Identify key stakeholders, map the outcomes. Map the outcomes. Evidence in the outcomes so you can monetize them, extremely important. Establishing impact, having collected the evidence on outcomes, monetize them. Ensure that you're able to show what the monetary value is. Calculate the rate of return on investment. Simple formula. Social benefits over social and financial costs. And you use different techniques of monetizing them. Incur loss methods. What kind of loss would have incurred if we didn't put in place this program? There are so many cost savings because we recognize that in Jamaica, a lot of the social entrepreneurship programs will have a lot of cost saving because there are a lot of people who are considered vulnerable and at risk. So you find that they save a lot. So these techniques are there, and all of these tools have been developed and have been applied. Every tool shown in this presentation have been developed and has been applied in the Jamaican landscape. And so we must realize that with all of these things, the truth is, no one organization, no individual can do this thing by themselves. It takes all the stakeholders coming together to get this thing done. And you don't need a PhD person to tell you that, because the rural Jamaican people tell you that one hand can't clap and many hands make the work light. Give thanks.